About 382 AD, in the days of Jerome, known for the Latin Vulgate, a new term began to circulate in Bible scholarship, according to R.H. Charles. Certain texts of historical value, and even canon, were now labeled as something other than inspired scripture. The very concept is a clear redefining of books already in existence, and in most cases, text recorded as inspired scripture and Bible canon now somehow in question by those without any such authority. This paradigm remains today even further rooted, as if it ever represented the historical approach to these Old Testament texts, as some vet as truth. How do these texts stand up to the Torah test? The answer on many of these books will likely shock especially scholars who have never actually conducted such research, which becomes evident. It's not in their paradigm. This canon was already chosen before there were Pharisees in Jerusalem and before there was ever a Catholic Church. Those factions do not get to legitimately form councils to vote on that which was already settled fact long before, even in archaeology. You are entering a zone for truth with our new Apocrypha test series. Follow along, and together we will dispel the myths of modern scholarship. And man, are they profoundly lacking in intellect on this topic, you will see. Not anymore. Download your copies of Volume 1 and Volume 2 of our comprehensive Apocrypha research, free in ebook today, or get your copies at apocryphatest.com. All links are there. We now begin. In 1947, the voice in the wilderness cried out yet again. Did you hear it? After 2,000 years of waiting for its time to be revealed, the time capsule of the only biblically ordained Bible canon, according to Scripture, began to be rediscovered. This was a massive treasure trove of Scripture, producing and affirming the entire modern Old Testament except the book of Esther, which becomes suspect and must be tested. We will. However, among these Old Testament texts were many additional books that had been removed from our modern Bibles. Why were they removed, and by whom? Which canon do we follow? Does the Bible not already establish this measure itself? Does it not ordain a specific group, and only one, as the curators of Old Testament Bible canon to the first century? Why do Bible scholars claim they might be in Egypt or the often rebuked Pharisee Sanhedrin? Can they read? Do they wish to, is the real question. They represent a paradigm that dares not to test. It's not in their false paradigm. Anyone doing so would never agree with most modern Bible scholars on much when it pertains to this topic. We're talking about what has become known as the Bible, though, yes, a pagan term. That is what we call the compilation of inspired Scripture. That record did not begin in 165 BC when Pharisees first entered Jerusalem in power over the religious institution in which they lorded and still do. Remember that. It most certainly did not wait for the Catholic Church to compile it 4 centuries later. These are not alternatives in logic. They are dumbfoundingly illiterate assumptions, proving that those scholars have little understanding on the topic. A child could do better. They lost the keepers of Scripture. Wow. They do not know who they were. The Bible never does lose it. And in this video, this will be restored. Where did those called to curate Scripture go? Because they were exiled from the temple. Many scholars don't even know that. Did they not leave a catalog for us? It is time to blow the lid off of this naivete in one of the dumbest lies in all of what they call Bible scholarship. Here we go. Moses, the author of Torah, the first books of the modern Bible, defined an office of priest, whom he ordained to keep Bible Canon through the ages. Don't ask why. Scholars don't know this. They should. Who else was ordained to do so in all of Scripture? Well, no one. No one ever in the entire Old Testament to the first century. Wow. So this is pretty easy. Well, it is, actually. You have got to be kidding that so-called Bible scholars do not even know who was sanctified to be the custodians of inspired Scripture. That is amazing that they don't have answers to these questions. Oh, just search. Go ahead, do a Google search right now. Stop the video and search Google. And ask Google who the custodians of the Bible were, and you will get the dumbest stuff you have ever read, mostly from rabbis. Oh, yes, they come up first, as if they have anything to do with curating Scripture. They never did. Deuteronomy 31:24. Moses writes, "And it came to pass, when Moses had made an end of writing the words of this law in a book." Yes, Moses still wrote that. He wrote after that. He wrote about the period after he died. Scholars don't know that either, because they're too stupid to realize he was a prophet, and they don't believe the Bible, obviously. Until they were finished. Now, that's Torah, of course. So there's Torah, done, right? Which included the book of Jubilees, we prove. Watch Answers in Jubilees and read the book. bookofjubilees.org. Free and ebook. That Moses commanded the Levites, which bear the Ark of the Covenant of Yahuwah. Now, that's the name Yahuwah, which YHWH was replaced with the generic title Lord 6,800 times in our modern manipulated Pharisee Bibles. Yeah, it's time we fix these things. And scholars already know this. They know better, but they refuse to even research, even a little bit, how to even pronounce the name Yahuwah. They have names like Jehovah, which is utterly stupid. No J, no V in ancient Hebrew. Yahweh, which requires two different rules in a four-letter word at the beginning and the end, which is nuts. None of these things make any sense. Saying, "Take this book of the law and put it in the side of the Ark of the Covenant of Yahuwah your Elohim, that it may be there for a witness against thee." So who decided Bible canon? Well, Yahuwah did. Yeah, see, that's where this really comes from. And who did he tell? Well, he told Moses. See, Moses did, and he told Moses to set an authority. Most scholars ignore that while they cling to Pharisees like Josephus or early church fathers who are Catholic, in most cases, and manipulate Scripture, such as Jerome, who was absolutely 100% an occultist and a liar. Nor the Egyptians, and yes, it was Egyptian Greek Septuagint translation, which we'll deal with next. We did have a rather intelligent comment, someone who was read up a little on the topic, but what they failed to do was go and test the stories of the origin of what they say is the Greek Septuagint, and the story fails miserably. We'll show you. We're going to cover that one next. When you find out the origin story of some of the dumbest claims in scholarship on that, you are going to be disgusted that any of these call themselves Bible scholars and can't see through such blatant propaganda. Is this somehow unclear, though? Did Moses maybe just suggest, no, Moses was the prophet. He was hearing from Yahuwah directly. This is Yahuwah's command. In fact, many scriptures will narrow the leadership in the tabernacle first, and then the temple, to the family of Aaron, the priesthood family of Aaron, who were Levites, and his descendants. This will narrow down even more, still Aaron, but more so in Bible history, to a specific family, and then actually even again to an even more specific family, all within Aaron. There's really no guesswork here. The Bible tells us who curated the Bible. Duh. Why wouldn't it? I mean, to think that it wouldn't is unthinkable. How is it that so-called Bible scholars do not know Moses only, ordain this one group, no one else, the Levites, to be the protectors and watchdogs of Scripture? It's amazing because they'll give you options and alternatives that are not such. And that's stupidity. That's not scholarship. They weren't in Egypt in 300 BC or so at the time of the Greek Septuagint origin, so that doesn't work. Sorry. Nor did they travel there. Oh, we'll deal with that fiction. And they were never Pharisees. Are you kidding? Pharisees, the opposite. They were exiled by the Pharisees from the temple, whom they called, the wicked priests, the sons of Belial or Satan, and all kinds of very revealing names. It's right there in the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's also right there in the words of Messiah. Why? Well, they stole the priesthood and they stole Scripture, and stupid scholars are using Pharisees as their basis to determine Bible Canon, which has always been illiterate. This whole word, Apocrypha, we dealt with last video. It means hidden away. So that literally Jerome was hiding Scripture and admitted it. And modern scholars just use the term as if it doesn't mean what it means. That's pretty dumb. For starters, if they do not know this basic of Bible principles, then it disqualifies them as Bible scholars on this topic. They have a useless education in terms of understanding these things, and they're not qualified to teach it. That's the problem, because that's what we think are the experts, and they are not. And we'll prove it, and we have many times over on this channel. This whole notion of Pharisee and Catholic councils, for instance, meeting much later to decide what books were supposed to be in the Bible. Are you kidding? The Bible was already selected. It was selected as it was written. Hello? I mean, it wasn't a disconnected paradigm. Jeremiah didn't write a book and then everybody say, gee, who was Jeremiah? They knew who he was, and immediately it was canon. No one questioned it. They knew he was a prophet because they had his writings in his time. This is it's an utterly stupid, unscholarly paradigm. And this is why they take books, they'll say, maybe Jeremiah was written 300 years later, or maybe Daniel was written, 500 years later, and that's stupid. Daniel wrote what Daniel said he wrote. Jeremiah wrote what Jeremiah said he wrote. Well, yes, Baruch was his scribe. Oh, Baruch, who's he? Gee, most people don't know. And yet, he also wrote a book, and we're going to deal with that too. See, these guys never had a say. Pharisees, Catholic Church, why are they holding a vote on something they have no right to vote on? That's the real point. Bible Canon was chosen before either party ever even existed. This is a major problem for most Bible scholars because, they lost this group. The Levites, especially the sons of Zadok, I'll show you. And they do not even remotely know how the Bible paradigm operated to the first century. What does that say about them as Bible scholars? Well, it's called willing ignorance, according to 2 Peter 3. He warned that was going to be basically the staple of our age, of these thinkers, these philosophers, these Stoics or Pharisees. Most scholars fall into this category of illiteracy, and it's so sad, but just read the writings. They damn themselves. Their sect not only lost the name of Yahuwah, replaced over 6,800 times. I mean, that's a pretty big loss. And really, I mean, you have to play such willing ignorance to look at that and say, la, 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 I don't know what that is. I don't know. YHWH, I think it's Lord. Really? You mean Baal? Where do you get the word BAAL from YHWH? Wow. I mean, you know, can they even think in basic terms? And the answer is no, because they're steeped in a paradigm. And this is where we are. This topic is one of the worst, as yes, it matters most, that we do not lose portions of our Bible. Someone said, you know, why don't you just talk about Jesus? Did you not know he is the Word? We are talking about him. In fact, did you not know that he endorsed this very community where Scripture was kept, put aside as a time capsule? We're going to show you in this video. The blind choose to follow the blind against Yahushua's warning. That's the reality. And as a second witness, here's another verse affirming the role of the Levites from Deuteronomy 10:8. They were the keepers of the Ark of the Covenant, which is where we just saw in Scripture was placed to keep in origin, what we call the Bible. Again, yes, we know that's a pagan term, but that's what we all call it. So we're going to keep using the term because that's what people know. They are the ones who would keep inspired Scripture to the first century. And there is no one else to consider here. That is the issue. In fact, this becomes a family within, then a smaller family within that, as this was a very specific group of holy priests, I'll show you. Not all Levites even, and most, certainly not all the 12 tribes. In fact, some of the Levites corrupted with Israel when Israel corrupted. But the sons of Zadok did not. They remained holy, and they still kept Scripture. More so, not the occult library of Alexandria from Egypt, which is nonsense. Never Pharisees, who are only rebuked by Yahushua is not knowing Scripture and turning Torah against Torah in Mark 7. Pretty simple. Only the temple priests, the legitimate temple priests who were exiled to Qumran, which is called Bethabara in the Bible. And we showed you last video some of that, but we're going to go into that in more detail in this video and the next two. There's nothing to debate nor discuss here. This is a firm, preserved track backed up by massive archaeology. The scholars, well, simply don't know. That just proves their ignorance, as they are trained up in a paradigm that lost even the very basics of Scripture, and that is sad. They can't even read the Dead Sea Scrolls and understand them even remotely because they say what they say, and you know they have to tell you, oh, but that doesn't really say that. They meant this because, this was the era of Hellenism and blah, 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 blah. Everything to them occurred in the era of Hellenism, which is ridiculous. Tobit dealt with idols. Abraham dealt with idols. Oh, that must have been written during Hellenism. Really? There were never idols in any of the Bible prior to Hellenism? That is the dumbest paradigm. Notice in receiving this calling, the Levites did not receive property in a portion of Israel, such as the other 12 tribes did. This is important to note because many times, depending on how you look at it, there are actually 13 tribes of Israel. And again, there's no reason to enter that debate. Who really cares? But this never confused the people of that time, nor anyone who really knows the Bible. Each context explains itself. You will notice different listings in Scripture by purpose, and that matters. In Revelation, you will notice Dan, for instance, missing because Dan rejected his inheritance and was the first to introduce idols in Israel. You will also notice Ephraim is listed there. Not by name, but within Manasseh, his brother, his older brother. And Scripture is very clear that Ephraim was the one who received the birthright to the land of Israel, not Manasseh. But the listing listed as Manasseh. There's nothing inappropriate about that. It's fine. In fact, this demonstrates just how far removed modern Israel is from Bible understanding, proving they're not biblical Israel. Watch the True Biblical Israel series. Regardless of their claims, and they only make claims, they never prove anything. No one ever made them prove that they were Israelites when the Rothschilds were given Israel, because that's what Britain did. They gave it to one man, Lord Rothschild, a Jew. See, they supposedly returned as the tribes of Judah. Oops, they made a big mistake. Though Judah has the scepter, and do realize that is in Messiah's hands. He's from Judah, duh. Judah never received the key or birthright to the nation of Israel. Ephraim did. And see, they forgot, actually never knew probably, because they are not true Israel and don't know the Bible either. Ephraim had to be the lead tribe to return because he had the key to the land. Oops. This is why they went down into Ethiopia later, and they accepted a claim from a group there bearing a fraudulent story of being from Ephraim, who never went into Africa. We cover that in the Lost Tribes series. They brought them into Israel to try to redeem themselves for doing what? For screwing up the prophecy in ignorance. That's what they did. I mean, you talk about egg on their face is really what that whole story is about, and they're admitting it. That's but it's pretty bad. But even worse, that tribe in Egypt made a claim from the occult. Got that? Not the Bible. Qumran, from the Queen of Sheba from Ethiopia, which is fraud. As she was from Shem, brother of Ophir, she was not from Ham. They're in the wrong continent. They're in the wrong part of the world to even think about making a claim. Yes, there were two Shebas in Genesis 10. One was the brother of Ophir, to which the Queen of Sheba's story is bookended. It's right in the middle of Solomon's navy, being built, going to Ophir, fetching gold, and the Queen of Sheba heard of the wisdom of Solomon. From who? From Solomon's navy, because they're there. It's so easy to see for those who can read. She even gave the same gifts as Solomon's navy because, well, she was from Ophir. Even worse, they omit the part of that occult Qumran story that queen of the wrong Sheba had the leg and hoof of a goat. And that's picked up in the Talmud, and it's picked up in the Qumran, and all fraudulent documents. This is just occult nonsense. That's really bad, right? Watch Solomon's Gold series, where we obliterate that nonsense. In the book of Jubilees, chapter 45:16, yes, that's called Torah, by the temple priests, the legitimate keepers of Torah. Oops. And it's called Torah by Moses, who in Genesis quotes a story from Jubilees that doesn't exist in Genesis and only exists in Jubilees. Oops. We cover that. Scholars don't know it. We are aware. And that's their problem, not yours and not ours. This deepens this even further. Yes, we are aware that Bible scholars are mostly oblivious to this book, the temple priests defined as Torah. But again, really, you got to watch that series, Answers in Jubilees, and download the book, free and ebook, bookofjubilees.org. Pharisee Bible basically is what they defend. And the reality is it's not the Bible of the Bible, because the Bible has keepers who kept certain texts and did not keep Esther, for instance. And he, Jacob, that's what this passage is about. You can read it in context. Go read the book. gave all his books and the books of his fathers. Yes, they're books that existed before Torah. Yes, Jubilees, Enoch for one, or for two. No, Genesis is not the first book of the Bible, historically. How about that? It does start at creation, so chronologically, in terms of what it covers, it belongs there. That's fine. There's no problem with that. But it's not the first book written. The book of Enoch is. And, we cover that too. And isn't Jude in the Bible? I'm pretty sure Jude's still in our Bibles, right? Did you know that Jude endorsed Enoch as a writer of Scripture and quotes an entire paragraph out of the book of First Enoch very directly? And then scholars will say, well, gee, maybe it's some other writing that Enoch wrote. Are you kidding? It's a paragraph right out of that book. It requires a willing ignorance, we'll just leave it at that, beyond dumbfounding. So, to Levi, his son, so Jacob to Levi, that he might preserve them, what? The books of his fathers, the Bible, and renew them for his children unto this day. Now, obviously Moses wrote this, so it's unto the day of Moses, who wrote Torah, and he's telling you there are texts that exist prior to Torah that are Bible, what we would call, again, yeah, we know it's a pagan term, but we'll use it because that's what we call the compilation of the prophets and the apostles, whether right or not. Now, this not only affirms the Levites were the keepers of Scripture, but their calling was to preserve and renew them. Well, how does one do that? It was the scribal tradition to copy these scrolls over every so many years. I know scholars don't know this, many don't seem to, because they'll actually find something in Qumran and claim that that is the original text of the creation of that book. That is stupidity. That is just, the whole paradigm in Qumran has got to be the dumbest we've ever seen. These people can't read, they can't think. It is the most disconnected from reality we've seen. We find that tradition continued in the Dead Sea Scrolls, where they even specify, in fact, the role. They didn't perform the scribal function on the Sabbath, for instance, they say in the writing, basically recording that they were scribes, at least some within, Levites, scribes. There are other scribes mentioned in the Bible that are not Levites, and that they're not keeping Bible. See, the Levites kept the Bible. It's well recorded there. They were continuing this practice to the first century. It's right there. You can't miss it. Thus, there is no question as to what comprises the Old Testament Bible canon. They chose it. They curated it. They kept it. They defended it. They preserved it. They are the ones called to do so, and the only ones that were ordained. So any other canon is laughable, is not a track to even bother to follow. Yahushua launched his ministry there in Qumran. Yes, it's called Bethabara in the Bible, endorsing that ministry as well. And he didn't do it in the Jerusalem temple because the temple was defiled and the Pharisees did not keep Scripture nor say anything that was truthful for the most part. Says he many times, just read his words. We covered them last video. This is a no-brainer yet, though Apocrypha Volume 2 remains number 1 on the hot new releases list for Amazon for its category still. The other 12 books released at the same time, well, they all propagate that Essenes lived in Qumran very stupidly. We're going to deal with that in this video. That includes the Essene Codex even. Utter trash. What a ridiculous title. Essenes didn't live in Qumran. Then look at the bestsellers in the category, of which Volume 2 remains number 7 as of today, and Volume 1 is ranked as number 9 still after 2 months. And guess whom they all say lived in Qumran? Every single one of them. Essenes, of course. That means every one of those books remains in a paradigm of stupid. They do not know what an Essene is or was, and neither one of these so-called scholars and PhDs can read. They just haven't bothered to research the topic. They don't know, and they're not experts on this. Now, we'll show you in this video, but let's complete the cycle here, because indeed, much happened in Jerusalem, and that is a valid point. So, maybe they lost track, right? Well, no, they didn't. We already showed you scripture that says they didn't, because they curated it to the first century. But we'll show you. We will not lose this track, even though scholars have. So the question becomes, did this change in Old Testament times? Well, no, it didn't. In fact, in the days of King Solomon building the first temple, here you go, this group of Levites is tightened to basically two holy Levite families, all from Aaron still, within the Levites. The sons of Zadok, right here. I mean, and then other than that, they're really the descendants of Eli. But this is the last descendant of Eli right here. So, but also from Aaron, both are. Soon after that, the sons of Zadok the only family, became the Levites specifically responsible and called to lead worship in the temple, to take care of the Holy of Holies, and keep Bible Canon, which was still kept in the temple with them. Understand that. The sons of Zadok were in Jerusalem at that time, especially of the Greek Septuagint, and nowhere else. They were the temple leadership. So why would we look to areas they did not live in the time frame, or factions that are not from Aaron, nor Zadok, nor even Hebrews for that matter, which is a whole other topic. We can send you to the True Biblical Israel series, and you'll see for yourself. But as someone receiving a transfer of ordination, where in Scripture does it say this ever transfers? Nowhere. Or it would be there if it happened. No one sane would think that. No one sane would assume that when it's just not there. After that, did this change then? No. It only deepened to the first century, really, or the entire time the Old Testament was determined and preserved. It was determined along the way. It wasn't that, all these books were somehow written and then, they needed to then vote after Messiah. That's just stupid. I mean, even to think in terms of that. These were curators of Scripture. This was their calling. It cannot change after these holy priests already determined it with historic precedent. No scholar is qualified to challenge or take a vote on, period, the end. Every Catholic council, every Pharisee council that attempted to do so was a sham. See, we don't tell you what we would like to see or not see as Scripture. That's not what we're doing here, and that's not what we've ever done. We bring you the historic precedent, something scholars should be doing, and they don't bother. This is not up for debate when you do so. Once established, that is the truth, and everything else is the lie. The fact scholars lost this is their problem, and they have some splaining to do, indeed. Ezekiel tells us this Levite family of the sons of Zadok did not stray when the rest of Israel did, but remained holy. Understand that. That means their calling remained. See, that's how Yahuwah works. We should know this if we know the Bible, scholars. And they were not replaced to the first century. So what you got? Well, it's the same. It didn't change. Ezekiel 40:46, it was the sons of Zadok, who were the keepers of the charge of the altar. They are the ones who are closest to Yahuwah, who led the worship system, and were replaced by Pharisees in 165 BC or so. In 44:15, the sons of Zadok kept the charge of Yahuwah's holy sanctuary, the Holy of Holies in the temple, and they did so when the rest of Israel went astray. They remained holy, and they are the only ones who kept Bible canon, and the only ones qualified to do so, because they're the only ones holy. This is pretty easy. Scholars should know this. This is very, very basic. In 4811, the sanctified priesthood in charge of the temple, the Holy of Holies, and Scripture, was the sons of Zadok, who again kept Yahuwah's charge when the rest of Israel went astray. Was Ezekiel not clear? Was he not a prophet? Did he not tell the truth? Even other Levites went astray, but not the sons of Zadok. Understand that. So how do we track Bible canon for the Old Testament? It's very easy. We find the sons of Zadok. Where did they go? Where did they not go? We for sure don't use a faction that did not exist until 165 BC in Jerusalem, the Sanhedrin and the Pharisees. That's ridiculous. They were never keepers of Scripture. They were replacements and imposters. Those are not Old Testament priests. Those are not Levites. They stole it, the temple, and usurped the priesthood. Canon was chosen before they were even there. Duh. So there's really nothing to discuss. This is pretty easy. And that's 400 years before there was a Catholic Church, so are you kidding? Don't even bring that up. Don't even try in comments, because that, my friends, even though it comes from scholarship, has always been a paradigm of stupid. Even the Greek Septuagint's earliest date of 300 BC is still far too late, as Bible canon was already curated along the way and protected and preserved by the sons of Zadok, the holy priests. They did so since Levi, Aaron, really Jacob, for that matter, the family of Levi, and the track is very clear. This is something scholars should know. And the fact that they don't proves they are not scholars when it comes to the topic of what is Bible canon. They're not telling you the truth because they don't know it. Not because they're trying to deceive. A lot of them are good men. But they are nonetheless. They're steeped in a paradigm of ignorance, thinking that Pharisees are temple priests, and that's a problem, when they are, in fact, the synagogue of Satan, who say they are Yahudim and are not, but do lie. Have they not read Revelation 2:9 and 3:9? That's what our Messiah said. Yes, Babylon sacked Jerusalem, and the Edomites with them destroyed the temple. Yes, the Edomites did, but on behalf of Babylon still. Ezekiel lived during that time, and yet, says the sons of Zadok, preserved Scripture. See, in fact, according to 2nd Esdras, it was the prophet Ezra, a son of Zadok as well, who Yahuwah used to restore the Scriptures in the return from Babylon. Yes, wasn't lost. Scripture remained. That same Scripture remained in the temple as what we would call Bible canon all the way up until 165 BC. What happened then? It was transferred to the place of their exile. Qumran is what we call it today. Bethabara is what it's called in the Bible. I'll show you on maps. Then we get to Daniel's transgression of desolation, Daniel 8. Not to be confused with his abomination of desolation a few chapters later, which most definitely occurs in the last days and has not happened yet. This is when the daily sacrifice of the true temple priests is ended in the temple, yet still continued by someone illegally. Why can't we read, scholars? Why is this so difficult? It's a very easy story. Now, we're going to cover this in this series. We're aware most scholars don't know how to read Daniel 8, and really, really poorly. We'll show you the languages there. It's very plain in the English language. It's kind of hard to miss, and it fits only one occurrence for this transgression of desolation, and it happened in 165 BC. It is a trespassing transgression. That's what it is. That's what it means, which means they take over illegally the daily sacrifice, but they continue it. And it does say it's continued. That's what Daniel says. They miss the fact that Daniel says 3 times in this passage that the daily sacrifice in the temple would be ended for the temple priest, yet continued by trespassers or imposters who are not temple priests. There you go. I mean, it's right there, very simple, and that came to pass in 165 BC. Now, we will define this very well in our research, especially from the book of Maccabees, which does not vet as scripture, and the history proves to be a complete fraud. Now, we're going to show you, and we'll back that up. Don't worry. Of course, you can read the book. It's already done. We already proved that. Maccabees even admits that itself. Let's just call a spade, and we'll show you where it does. However, you can watch our Who Defiled the Temple video even now, and it will expose this in concept from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Who wrote and curated the Dead Sea Scrolls? All found in Qumran, pretty much. I mean, 99 point whatever percent of them, all found in Qumran, around a compound, an entire community of temple priests that was there, the exiled temple priests. It was the sons of Zadok. Well, that's what they say. That's what their writings say. Now, Bible Canon would leave the temple with the legitimate temple leadership. See, that's the key. It follows the calling, not the place. The temple was defiled and no longer had the Holy of Holies of Yahuwah either. The second temple never did, and was of no consequence at that point. Yes, Yahusha went there. Yes, the apostles went there. There's no doubting that. They did. Of course, they also went into synagogues, and synagogues are basically Babylonian creations of the Pharisees. They have nothing to do with Scripture. You don't find synagogues in the Old Testament. It's not part of the Bible construct. So it would basically be replaced there along with an illegitimate temple priesthood of impostors from Samaria called Pharisees or Farsis, Persians essentially, and in origin they are, and the Sanhedrin, which didn't exist in the Old Testament. Oh, wait a minute. You do realize that listing of Sadducees, Pharisees, they weren't in the Old Testament. They're not there. They're not part of the Bible leadership. It's new. So when you read that in the New Testament, that's completely new. Neither faction is even mentioned as existing in Jerusalem prior to 165 BC. And that's when the Hasmoneans came in and conquered Judea and stole the temple and replaced the priesthood and exiled the priesthood to Qumran. That's the actual history, the actual story, very well documented. These were new and not the sons of Zadok, no matter what their claims. Who were these exiled temple priests as opposed to the fake priesthood now in the temple as of 165 BC? Basically, they were there to its destruction in 70 AD. Oops. Is that why Yahusha and the temple priest rail on the Pharisees and Sanhedrin as the seed or lot of Satan, sons of Belial? Satan, same word. Synagogue of Satan, liars, hypocrites, thieves, murderers, illiterate, ignorant bunch, the blind leading the blind. Come on. Can scholars even read? How is it that they've lost this faction? And this is the faction they're listening to. This is the faction that they're hearing and saying, oh, see, they say that's Bible canon, so it must be. Josephus was a Pharisee. Well, we're going to deal with that in a couple of videos. In his own words, that's what he says. So any scholar telling you, no, he didn't say that, can't read. That's all. They just can't. He had an autobiography, and he says he was a Pharisee. He admits it. He also was an Essene. Oops. Now, can most pastors, ever research this? Most do not. That's the problem. They just take what seminaries dispense, and they teach it. Now, you would think that would be trustworthy. The problem is it's not, and we live in an age where seminaries have been corrupted as well. So we must test, prove all things. They're attacking the word, and that's why this is serious. And yes, we have atoned and will continue to, because this is disgusting. And anyone who doesn't think it is, well, you shouldn't be in this channel anyway. This is not for you. You need to grow up a little first. If it doesn't matter to you that the word was changed, well, then go someplace that doesn't know it. They are still guilty, and let's be clear, we used to be as well, right? I mean, we all played along with this at some point in our lives in the Christian world. This is not about condemnation, but about learning the truth and applying it from now on. We really don't care about the ego of scholars. So what? We don't care that people get offended. Yes, James says, the truth of the word offends. That's the way it goes. The temple, and we love you enough to offend you. You're welcome. The temple was taken over as Daniel predicted in the exact same manner Daniel predicted, and Enoch and David also predicted with the same accuracy. How about that? Now, we'll cover these in this series as well. So I'm not just going to say that and leave it there. We're going to follow that up. The sons of Zadok were exiled, kicked out of the temple on the Day of Atonement even. So let's not pretend Pharisees give a crap about feasts. They violate every single feast every single year. Watch our Feasts of Yahuwah, YHWH series. Anyway, they were exiled to Qumran. Wait, that's its Muslim name, continued in fraud. It's the biblical Bethabara. Oh, that matters. Because now you have a New Testament community, and the Pharisees shouldn't even be involved. Oops. Now, we'll show you this. And there they continue to execute the priesthood, keeping Bible Canon, because they are the ones who received that ordination. And no one else. No one replaced them legitimately, and their canon remained, and still does, as it was found in archaeology since 1947. The Old Testament is firm. And very quickly, the modern Pharisees and Catholic Church, the ones who changed the Bible, modern Pharisees, that's Judaism, yes. They moved to cover up their fraud, claiming Essenes lived in Qumran. We're going to deal with that in this video. Yes, it needs to be tested beyond that which is what we're doing, right? It's not enough to just find it there and say, oh, that must be Scripture. No. Let's test it. And that's what we're doing systematically in our recent books. They identify themselves, the writers of the Dead Sea Scrolls, over 100 times or so. Basically, these scrolls were found exclusively, almost all of them in Qumran, the biblical Bethabara. Let's be clear, there's not a single occasion in this massive number of writings that they ever identify themselves as Essenes. That would be utterly stupid to then say, well, I think they were Essenes. No, you don't think if you say that. That's the truth. They call themselves the sons of Aaron. The Levites, the sons of Levi. 72 times, duh. But scholars, well, they can't seem to figure out whom they could be. Gee, I don't know. I guess they're Essenes. You're stupid. You're not a scholar. You're stupid. That's it. Really. They're just playing dumb and inserting a cult that never lived in Qumran. We even know where they lived because archaeology proves it, so does history. The Essenes were a Kabbalistic cult. See, they're trying to diminish who lived in Qumran. And that is the most important find in all of history. Wow. Because they found the Bible. Ooh, wow. But those that change the Bible don't want us to know that. Ouch. Now, that Kabbalistic cult is part of the Pharisee construct, according to Josephus. We'll show you that in his words. So it's part of what they call modern Judaism, rabbinic Judaism today, because that became Judaism, Phariseeism did, after the Second Temple was destroyed. They got rid of the Second Temple rituals, of course, and they gave it a new name. It really doesn't matter what one calls it. It is the occult infused into the Bible. 2 Kings 17 is very clear on that. Does that sound familiar? Where did Essenes live then? Well, they had a headquarters on the Dead Sea, indeed, but it was not in Qumran. It was 25 miles south of there and had no connection whatsoever to this community of what Ezekiel says were the holy priests from the temple, who also never once called themselves Essenes in the whole of Scripture. Why don't scholars know that? Pliny the Elder places the Essene headquarters in Ein Gedi, 25 miles south of Qumran. He was a geographer, therefore credible. There you go. And he's the only one to actually locate the Essene headquarters in writing that we've ever found and that anyone's ever found that we can see. But this is really not hidden to history at all. Also, massive archaeology confirms this, what they call the Essene Find. Hello, scholars. Can you read? That's been found in Ein Gedi, again, 25 miles south of Qumran, not in Qumran. There we find the worship of the Essenes, well documented as a cult, never Bible. I mean, have you read the Old Testament, scholars? Have you really never noticed the Bible never refers to the temple priests as Essenes? Not even once. In fact, it never even mentions Essenes until the New Testament regarding Bar Jesus, the Essene. Acts 13:6, an evil man. That's not a temple priest. 2 verses later, we see the child of the devil, Elymas, also an Essene, according to Acts 13:8. And the bewitching Essene, Simon the sorcerer, from Acts 8:9. These were Essenes. Temple priests were not. And anyone saying so is no Bible scholar. In fact, Josephus makes it clear, and we'll show you, the Essenes are a faction within Judaism, or what was called Phariseeism at that time. All sources are in the book. Prove all things. Test this for yourself. In this occult community of Ein Gedi, or Eye of the Goat, that would be the English translation of it. Oops. Yeah, something seems off about that. They found a synagogue with the 8-pointed star of Ishtar, a Nazi swastika long before World War II. Think about that. A Freemasonic warning on the wall. The prince demon Asmodeus, the peacock angel, as he's known in symbology, all over this community as well. They were obsessed with peacocks. Why? Because they worship peacocks. The peacock angel, Asmodeus, Asmodee. Oh, wait a minute. As in Modein, where the Hasmoneans originated. We'll go there, don't worry. Not a single fragment of scripture was found in Ein Gedi. None. Get that. Just a Bar Kokhba, memorandum. And who cares about that? That's a Pharisee memorandum, not one from the keepers of scripture. Because this Essene community is not associated with Qumran in any sense. And this they'll never prove because there is none. They were never temple priests, or the Bible would say so. Essenes were never the name of the holy curators of Scripture, or the Bible would say so. So who lived in Qumran then? Well, they say they were the sons of Zadok, the exiled temple priests, sons of Aaron, sons of Levi, etc., right? But can we confirm this? Are you kidding? The Bible comes right out and thoroughly documents this community, including Messiah himself. But it's been lost because the Pharisees in charge of the Dead Sea Scrolls are covering up who lived in Qumran. See, there's a reason why they're doing that. They're frauds and liars. What is Qumran? Well, we'll show you maps in a moment, but on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea, where the caves of Scripture were found with a compound that was structured similar to the temple. That's Qumran. But wait a minute. That's a new Muslim name. That's not what it's called in the Bible. That's to continue the fraud, of course, to hide the New Testament community, for that matter, which was found there. This is where Messiah picked up his first disciple. How about that? It's where he was baptized. Ooh, how about that? It's where the last great prophet, John the Baptist, operated. Maybe the Pharisees shouldn't be in charge of this find in the first place. Ooh, how about that? That's why they don't want you to see that. Joshua 15:61 places basically a location called Bethabara, which is Hebrew for Bethabara, same in Greek, right there in the area of what we call Qumran, on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea. This is no coincidence that so much scripture was found there. It is the place of exile of the exiled temple priest who kept Bible canon. Wait, what's this in the New Testament? Only the very place where Yahusha launched his ministry. Notice he did not do so from the Jerusalem temple, as it was defiled for more than 150 years at that point, and the priesthood was fake imposters he called so many times. And by the way, they're called rabbis then, and they're still called rabbis today. Understand that. Modern rabbinic Judaism is Phariseeism. How scholars lost that, I cannot even remotely understand. It's very easy to connect. They say so in the Jewish Encyclopedia. So we told you about that in part 1 and in both books. John 1:28. Where was Yahusha baptized? In Bethabara, the same place beyond Jordan, what we call Qumran today. When you head from Galilee southward, as Messiah did, and you go beyond Jordan, as it says, you pass through the Jordan Valley, and it ends where? When you go beyond it? Well, the wilderness of Judea at the Dead Sea, in the area we call Qumran today, the biblical Bethabara. No, you don't go to Israel, put on a white robe, and let them baptize you in the Jordan River. Don't do it. That is ridiculous, and those rabbis are laughing at us in the back rooms. They know they're liars. They know this. They're supposed to, according to their own Talmud, lie to us. They always have known and always have been. Yahusha was baptized in the fresh water springs of Bethabara, or Qumran, as we know it today. And John the Baptist was what? An Essene? Are you kidding? That is incredibly stupid. No, Essenes lived in Qumran, first of all. John was a bloodline temple priest, a Levite on both sides, according to Scripture. Can these people read who say these things? Clearly not. His father was from the course of Abiah, a Levite family, and priestly family at that. However, Elizabeth, his mother, was specifically from Aaron of the sons of Zadok, who managed the temple before, but were now exiled to Qumran. That's why John was there in the wilderness of Judea ministering, just as they said their purpose is to prepare the way in the wilderness for Yahusha. He had a place there in Qumran, a large compound that operated similar to the temple, and there were lots of, well, imagine this, and we cover this, baptismals everywhere. How about that? Wouldn't that be a good place for John the, say, Baptist? The last great prophet, according to Yahusha. The Elijah come again. So let's clear up something right here, right now. Any idiot calling themselves a Bible scholar saying that Malachi was the last prophet is illiterate. Anyone saying Elijah coming again in prophecy is to occur in the future has not bothered to read Yahusha's words in Matthew 11, where he tells us that was John. That's already been fulfilled. Also, there were no 400 silent years in Scripture. In this series, we'll restore that too. What ignorance. That is another lie. And this goes even deeper. Who was one of Messiah's first disciples? Well, he picked him up while here in Bethabara, or Qumran, as they have left its Muslim name and fraud, of course. His name was Andrew. Andrew was a Levite serving under John the Baptist as a disciple, a son of Zadok, qualified to be high priest, John was. Andrew picked up and followed Yahusha from that point, at John's insistence even, according to Scripture, and his brother was Peter. Yep, also a Levite. How about that? See, they still are there in the New Testament. And this has been lost. It's been disconnected. So no, you can't disconnect the Levites from the New Testament either. This community is the key to understanding the transition from old to new, as this was a continuation of those who had been awaiting Messiah's coming, which, by the way, they well knew, as Ezra in 2nd Ezra predicted as well. The era all the way down to 1 BC would be the coming of Yahusha, by name even. How about that? Oh, better take that out of the Bible. Oh, they did. That's right. Oops. That's in Apocrypha too. You don't get more perfect nor credible in prophecy. Think about that. They tell you in their prophecy in the community, which we have covered, that they are the ones who were preparing the way in the wilderness for Messiah. John the Baptist was their leader in that age even. Why do you think they disappear around the same time that Yahushua was crucified, even before the temple was destroyed? Well, because they followed him, joining the apostles largely. Of course they would. They were awaiting his coming. So they knew when he came, for the most part. Again, we know that because John the Baptist lived there and was their leader. Hello. Now, some also, again, followed him as apostles. Now wait, can we firmly say Qumran is Bethabara? Oh, we can. Absolutely. 1,000%. Check this out. This is something that it's unbelievable that scholars have not bothered to look at ancient maps. Pretty stupid. Did you know the very oldest map of Israel, ancient Israel, in existence is the Madaba mosaic map in Jordan? It's in tile, all right, so it's not going to be 100% to scale, of course. Hard to do that with tile, yet still, it proves Bethabara is Qumran. It's right there on the map. We'll show you. Look at the portion of the northwest corner of the Dead Sea, again, in tile. That is the Greek word there, Bethabara, right there. That's where Yahushua was baptized, and it is Qumran. This becomes far more exact, don't worry, but even this rough map shows it. And that's about 500 AD, at least in that century. This is very well preserved on credible maps. Here's one from 1770, the Bon map of Israel. Oh, look, on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea. Oh, what's that labeled? Oh, it's not called Qumran there, is it? No, because that's a new Muslim name continued in fraud. It is labeled the biblical Bethabara. In Hebrew, of course, Betharaba, as Joshua located it in the same spot. That's really not difficult to see, is it? Why can't scholars figure this out? It's easy. They're not trying, that's why. In 1836, there's Bethabara, still in the area we call Qumran today. In 1845, Bethabara, still what we call Qumran. And even in 1852, still there on the northwest corner of the Dead Sea, what we call Qumran, is Bethabara. That's always been known as Bethabara. This is where Yahushua was baptized. This is where John the Baptist operated. This is where the sons of Zadok, the temple priest, were exiled to and continued to keep Bible Canon, which is why we found so much there. The whole cave system was all connected at one time to the compound, probably with, suspension bridges, etc. We demand modern Israel stop the fraud and restore this area to its Bible name. Idiots. I know, but there's no evidence tying John the Baptist to Qumran, Bethabara, right? Actually, there is indisputable direct evidence of John's prophecy being the prophecy of the sons of Zadok there, preparing the way for Yahushua in the wilderness. We've covered that. They call him the prince of the congregation, in fact, Yahushua. They called John the Baptist the master of the congregation, a term for leader, really. We cover this in John the Baptist, found in the Dead Sea Scrolls. Check out that video. And, of course, we cover it in the book as well some. We have a chart there, a page, as you see on screen. All this information's there. In fact, John had a very mysterious diet of locusts and honey. Do we mean the insect? Indeed, absolutely, 100%, as that is on the biblical diet of the temple priests in Qumran, mentioned twice, and it is definitively the insect who is a clean food, and it even tells how to prepare them. This is something they did there. There's John's prophecy and diet found right there in Qumran, because it is the biblical Bethabara where he lived and operated. So what does all this mean? Well, it's very simple, folks. This is Bible Canon, and the only measure for the Old Testament in all of Scripture. See, the Bible tells us that there is only one, and only one track. You will find it cataloged and preserved in what they call Qumran today. Again, fraud. Anything not found there is suspect, and all of the modern Old Testament was affirmed there, except the book of Esther, which must be tested, and we will do so in this series. But you can skip ahead. We've already tested it some in our series called Testing the Book of Esther. But we're going to get into that more. We're going to deal with Maccabees and Judith. These are all frauds that didn't belong in. They were never Apocrypha. They were never almost Scripture. And the books, the other books that vet as Scripture, inspired Scripture, never belonged in a category of almost Scripture or hidden away. That's what Apocrypha means. But we'll show you the documentation, book by book. Don't even think about attempting debate on that generally or book by book yet, because we haven't gotten to it. But we will in detail, we promise. And we already do in the book. You can read. There is no other place where the temple priests operated to the 1st century, period. This is it. And they left their library there for us to find. Imagine that. The voice in the wilderness cried out yet again in 1947 or so. Did you hear it? Many did not, but we should have. It should have sent shockwaves around the world. And it did some, even in scholarly circles. They think it's fascinating, but none of them bother, and I mean none, bother to actually research who these were and were not. And they buy this stupid lie that they were Essenes, and they allow them to minimize Scripture. That's what they're doing. Now, in the next couple of videos, we'll complete our foundation for this series, and then we'll get into book by book. Next, we're going to deal head-on with the Greek Septuagint, which is a useful publication, let's be clear, but never a representation of Bible canon, and we'll demonstrate that very clearly. We'll take you back through basically to a 2,000-year-old fraud story that was attempted, and some have even mentioned it in comments. It will be laughable by the time we're done with it, yet maddening, of course. At the same time, when you see what Pharisees attempted, and some even repeat this trash as a so-called position. It never was, never will be, and will obliterate it once and for all. We'll expose that. Then, what about Josephus? I mean, he lists a sort of 22-book Bible canon, right? In 90 AD or so. Well, was he a Levite priest? Well, no. And he was a liar, said Yahusha. We've got to remember that. Yahusha branded his faction as liars. Now, we will deal directly with Josephus's words, whom he said he was, right? No scholar can actually debate that because it's the guy's own words that he was a Pharisee and an Essene. Wait, a what? Josephus was an Essene and he listed his Essene Bible canon? Wait a minute. Now, how dumb are scholars to overlook that to claim Qumran was an Essene community with an Essene canon? It doesn't match. How ridiculous. They want to marginalize the temple priests at any cost. That's what they want because they changed Scripture. Because their canon is not the original Bible canon. We now have the original by which to compare, and the fraud is so super obvious now. It's time to put the Pope and the leader of all rabbis on trial, as both are complicit in the changing of the Bible. You couldn't be worse in the eyes of Yahuwah and in the eyes of true believers. But nah, no need. Revenge is mine, says Yahuwah. They are cursed, all of them. This is no small thing. Don't follow them. They'll only lead you to hell. Indeed, the term Apocrypha, which in English means hidden away, we covered that last video. Let's all remember that, though. This is a category created by the Catholic Jerome, 382 AD roughly, with the intention to hide some scripture that most certainly vets as inspired, and it is not even found published anymore in most Bibles today. Understand that. I don't know. We had one, probably Catholic, but clearly completely illiterate of reality, didn't even know that most Bibles do not include the Apocrypha today. Duh. How do you not know that? Well, probably, again, Catholic. But try watching a video before you comment, perhaps. Yeah, and you won't look so foolish. This is not a Catholic channel, and reality does not identify Apocrypha as Bible in most cases today. It should for some books. But again, you got to look at this book by book, and that's coming very soon, because some fail. Some do not belong, but most do. Remember to like this video and subscribe to our YouTube channel and enjoy our other platforms and websites, all in the description box. We have published 9 books in 3 years, and we ain't stopping. More to come very soon. We love you all, and always remember, prove all things for yourself. Yah bless to everyone.